Good afternoon. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners work session for Thursday, April 1st, 2021. It is 2 p.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards is present. County Manager Amira Chavez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and a crew from our Public Works team, including our County Engineer Scott Lindblom. The public may follow along on our Thurston County YouTube channel, where the live stream is shown, or through a conference call, access point 360-252-9020, pin is 1234. We have 1 hour scheduled for a topic called Public Works Project Delivery Process, and Commissioner Carolina Mejia has just joined.
Yep.
And I will turn this to the County Manager.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. This briefing today, this afternoon is informational only. There is no decision that we're going to be seeking from the board, no now or later. And I'm also looking forward to this briefing because that comes my geeky side of my profession as a civil engineer. And I hope you find this very enlightening as to how a project, a public works project, transportation for the most part, goes from inception all the way to completion when construction is completed. So we have a Zoom screen of experts, and each one of them plays a key role in the delivery of those very important projects in the county. Scott.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Scott Lindblom, County Engineer with Public Works. And as the County Manager mentioned, we've got a variety of faces that you'll see on the screen today. And these are just a small handful of the team it takes to really deliver our capital projects. But really just to start out, preserving and maintaining our road system is a priority for Public Works. It's far more cost effective to crack seal or chip seal or overlay a road than it is to rebuild a road. Given the overall condition of our road system, the demands placed on it, and the resources we have, there comes a point when even the most robust maintenance preservation can't address the need. When this happens, the condition of our pavement is so poor we can't chip seal or overlay a road, we have to rebuild it. As you're aware, we rely heavily on grant funds to rebuild our roads, and this typically requires us to rebuild the road to the current standards. For example, when we upgrade Vale Road this summer, we're adding paved shoulders, stormwater treatment, removing objects from the clear zone to make them safer, in addition to removing and replacing all the old asphalt. To do this, it takes a huge effort behind the scenes to make it all happen, while you only get to see glimpses of these lovely faces from time to time throughout the course of a project, from inception to completion. So we're here today to walk you through at a very high level what happens and who's leading the effort, and also to put some faces to the names that you'll see. Next slide, please, Becky. So we look at the delivery of projects in 4 phases. We have the planning phase, pre-design, design, and construction. On the right side of the screen, you'll see typical timeframe for what a typical project might take, but it's highly variable depending on the complexity of the project. That's why I'm really emphasizing typical. So it's not uncommon for a bigger project to take 4 or more years to complete. For example, the Mullen Road project that you're aware of, now in construction, actually began in 2015 and should be complete with construction this year. A smaller project might only take a year or perhaps 2 years to complete from beginning to end. So it's very highly variable, and the timeframes associated with these projects also vary in complexity, vary in length due to the complexity. Throughout the course of any one of our projects, the public has several opportunities to get involved and provide their input. The little person symbol you see on the right with a little, like a voice bubble, I guess, that represents when the Public Works team will host public meetings or have open houses. On a typical project, we host 3 to 5 meetings, and not including those individual meetings we have often with individual property owners that live in or around one of our projects. The public also has an opportunity to provide their comments during the development of the CIP, the TIP, and the budget public hearings. So throughout today, and to give you context, we'll be using our Yelm Meridian Roundabout project scheduled for construction this summer is kind of an example to tie these planning phases into a real world project that you've already seen some of the times we've presented items for you, and you'll be seeing some others throughout the course of the project. Now we're going to start to walk you through the process, starting with the planning phase, which is really when we first become aware of a problem. And we'll walk you through all that down to the project completing construction led by Steve Bricker. But for right now, Matt Unzelman will take the reins and talk about the planning phase.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Matt Unzelman, Thurston County Traffic Engineering and Operations Manager. And it wouldn't be right if I also didn't introduce Becky Kahn, who is also here in our traffic group, and she helps help us oversee the first two phases of the delivery process, which are, as Scott mentioned, the planning phase as well as the pre-design phase. So the planning phase. So every project isn't just a project to be a project. There has to be a need, or what we're calling a business case. The business case can be generated in a number of ways, including input from the public regarding safety or the level of congestion. Usually these requests are received through service requests, which may come through the internet, which may come through our front desk. Often they come from commissioner aides. Our maintenance operations folks might notice a preservation need in the field, or maybe they notice a traffic congestion issue or a safety issue. And then also our transportation team is always doing local studies addressing capacity to make sure that we're meeting the requirements of the Growth Management Act. And we're also always doing safety studies to make sure that we're staying ahead of any collision trends or patterns that may be occurring on the county infrastructure system. For the Yelm Meridian project, the need was really driven by traffic congestion, as you can see in the left photo. In the PM peak hour in 5 to 6 o'clock hour, that intersection really backs up and it creates safety concerns, which you can see on the right. There's just one of, unfortunately, numerous collisions that have occurred at this intersection. So once the need has been established, we can go to the second phase, which is the pre-design phase. Next slide, Becky. There you go. So the pre-design phase obviously includes the pre-design study. And the study addresses each project's unique complexities, which are considered by Thurston County staff, as well as a project stakeholder team that is developed to do the study. And the stakeholder team can include members from other local agencies, consultants, emergency services, local school districts, and any other interested party. And it's at this point of the project where we set up that first stakeholder meeting specifically for the project, or public meeting specifically for that project. And what we're doing at that public meeting is we're soliciting feedback regarding the alternatives that have been proposed for the project. The state will take that criteria and will include it along with other criteria, including environmental impacts, right-of-way impacts, traffic congestion, traffic safety, construction, and the long-term maintenance impacts. And that all gets weighed together to determine what the preferred alternative is for that project. For the Yelm Meridian project, we evaluated several alternatives. One alternative included a traffic signal, another alternative considered an all-way stop. We considered striping changes, signing changes, but we also considered the installation of a roundabout. And the roundabout was determined to be the most efficient and effective preferred alternative because in the ways that it can so efficiently address traffic congestion as well as address collision histories occurring at the intersection as well. Once the preferred alternative has been determined, Public Works seeks authorization from the county engineer as well as the Public Works director to add these projects to our annual capital improvement program our 6-year transportation program, the state 6-year transportation program, and our budget. Once those projects are included in those plans, then staff can begin to seek for funding opportunities. So for transportation projects, staff tries to utilize much smaller amounts of local funds, i.e. the county road fund or real estate excise tax or REIT, or traffic impact fees. And we can use these much smaller amount of local funds to leverage for much greater amount of state and federal funds, which are needed for these projects, because these projects are not cheap projects. The Yellow Meridian project is, Teresa will give you the exact numbers later on in the presentation, but it's a $2 million, probably close to a $2 million project, and we leverage smaller amounts of county road fund and mitigation funding. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to discuss phase 3, which is the design phase.
Good afternoon, commissioners and county manager. My name's Teresa Parsons. I'm the engineering project manager, and I will start out with once the project has been defined as and put into the appropriate planning documents, CIP, TIP, as Matt talked about, then it gets handed over to our group. Our group provides the design and overall project management of roads, bridges, and other capital projects for Public Works. Each project is unique, so these are generally the steps followed for a road project. And often some of these steps are iterative. So the first thing that our group does when we get the project is evaluate and review the funding requirements, pre-design and alternative analysis, recommendations, and other pertinent data. For Yale Meridian, the intersection had been identified as a safety and congestion problem with Roundabout as the preferred solution. The county was able to obtain federal funding to augment the county funds. And I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it was around $1.3 million that we were able to obtain. Traffic impact fees were also used to fund this. The first thing we do after that analysis is coordinate with survey to obtain detailed topographic information to create an accurate base map of the existing land. And it goes far enough out to provide sufficient information to be able to tie back into the existing infrastructure when the project is built. We develop a scope, schedule, and budget, and these two are checked and revised as the project proceeds. We will have basic design standards that we utilize to start out with that include the WSDOT standard specifications, standard plans, funding standards. Often the funding agency will have criteria, our county road standards, and best engineering practice standards. Elements of that design include drainage design, channelization, the actual footprint of the project and impacts to surrounding property, the lane configuration, sidewalks, curbs. We coordinate with utilities. As we proceed with the design, when plans are around 30% and the actual footprint impacts are known, we will begin working with the environmental group to determine necessary permits and processes and to begin applications as appropriate. Depending upon the permitting and approvals that we need depends upon how far we need to be in the process to be able to fulfill their application requirements. Depending on the location and impacts to sensitive areas and type of funding and complexity of the permits determines our strategy for moving forward. Common permitting authorities that we deal with are our planning department for the State Environmental Policy Act checklist, SEPA. If there's federal nexus, we will do a National Environmental Policy Act process, NEPA. We deal a lot with Department of Fish and Wildlife, State Department of Fish and Wildlife, United States Department of Fish and Wildlife, United States Army Corps of Engineers, Washington State Department of Ecology. There's floodplain management authority. Also at this stage, we will reach out to the adjacent properties through the SEPA notice. So they are brought in at the beginning of the design. For the Elm Highway this project is in Mazama Pocket Gopher soil territory. Reconnaissance by a certified Mazama Pocket Gopher surveyor was done and no animals were found. We must continue to monitor the site. NEPA and SEPA have been done. Through the NEPA and SEPA process, there's sub-elements to those, including cultural, historical, potential impacts, environmental justice, which includes disproportionate impacts to minority populations. It gives us guidelines on how to reach out to the public depending upon language differences, low English proficiency populations. In the Yale Meridian area, we found that there's an 11% Hispanic population. At this stage, we'll also begin creating a right-of-way map to determine the need for additional right-of-way, if any, and/or easements. Typically, we also will do a public outreach once we determine that right-of-way will be required to give information on be prepared what's coming and how the process works. I'll turn it over now to Craig Sisson, our Real Estate Services Manager.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am Craig Sisson, the Real Estate Services Manager, and I will be discussing the right-of-way phase of the project. I like to think of it as the most exciting phase of the project. I think you'll agree. Upon completion of the preliminary design phase, the county engineer signs a notice to proceed memorandum directing the Real Estate Services section to begin the right-of-way acquisition phase of the project. The acquisition of right-of-way is strictly governed by federal law, state law, and county code. The Fifth Amendment and the Uniform Relocation, Assistance, and Real Property Acquisition Act of 1970 are the federal laws governing right-of-way acquisition. Washington state laws are Chapter 808 and Chapter 826 RCW. Thurston County Code, Chapter 1516 allows county staff to acquire property for public projects. Once we get the go-ahead, staff returns to the Board of County Commissioners requesting permission to execute the right-of-way funding agreement. The right-of-way acquisition map that was developed during the preliminary design phase is used to determine the number of permanent and temporary agreements needed for each project. Public Works hires independent appraisers to determine the value of each acquisition and is required to hire a separate independent review appraiser to review the appraisals for compliance with state and federal laws. Once the appraisals are approved, staff and/or a consultant make offers to property owners, negotiating a mutually acceptable agreement to acquire the necessary property rights. This process is often time-consuming and typically involves several meetings with each property owner. If negotiations with a property owner are not successful and an impasse occurs, the county may elect to file a condemnation action against each property owner, against the particular property owner, pardon me. Legal process that allows a government entity to acquire the private property for a public need is the condemnation process. Courts determine the value of the property in question, and the county is required to pay the stipulated amount to the property owner in exchange for the property rights acquired. Public Works staff attempts to resolve all negotiations and avoid the condemnation process due to increased cost and time delays. Upon completion of the right-of-way phase, the real estate services manager delivers a letter to design engineering team certified that all property rights necessary for the project have been acquired. For the Yelm Meridian project, the real estate services office acquired 7 permanent property rights through partial property acquisitions and 2 temporary property rights under temporary construction easements. I'll give it back to Teresa to discuss what happens directly after the right-of-way phase. Thank you.
So parallel to and extending beyond the right-of-way acquisition, typically our group will continue to finalize the design and begin to prepare the bid documents. So elements of the final design include final grades, the final drainage, signage, striping layout, make sure that we match to existing and make sure that driveways and other properties are not negatively impacted and can access. We develop estimated quantities. We write specifications to let the contractor know what the expectation of construction is and materials. Along with the final bid documents, we will develop an engineer's estimate. And once we're prepared, we typically will have to request permission from the funding agency to call for bids. And we have typically gone to the board at this stage also to seek permission. Then we will advertise, and then we'll open bids. And per state law, we are required to award to the responsible bidder. And there's a legal determination, RCW, that explains when the responsible bidder is submitting a responsive bid, which is a bid that meets the requirements set forth in the bid documents. Just to be aware, sometimes fluctuations in the market can drive costs up or less frequently down, depending upon how busy the contractors are, and other outside influences can really change or affect the bids that we receive. Once we determine that the lowest responsible bidder submitting a responsive bid has been verified, we will then come back to the board and request permission to award. Yelm Meridian, in this case, the board was asked to allow staff to finalize the agreement with the funding agency and to call for sealed bids. We did that just to streamline the process. The call for bids is anticipated to be in the next 1 to 2 months. And once bids are opened and reviewed, we will move forward with the construction. Sometimes and often around this time, we will reach out to the public and just let them be aware that the project is imminent. We'll work with construction to help get that information out, because some of that's dependent on the contractor's schedule that they will submit to the county. I'd like to hand it off now to Steve Bricker, our construction manager.
Good afternoon, commissioners and county manager. I'm Steve Bricker, the construction manager for Public Works. The Yelm Meridian project will be bidding in April and is planned to go to construction early this summer. The project construction phase consists of the following 3 steps. The first is the actual construction, the infrastructure. Once construction begins, the work done by the contractors and utility companies is inspected to ensure design, plan specifications, budget, schedule, and traffic control safety requirements are being met. We review and approve all required documentation. Some of this documentation consists of a record of materials that's created, and this helps ensure that the materials that are submitted from contractors meet the requirements of specifications And we also track which ones have been reviewed and approved. The list is provided to the contractors and inspectors, and while they're on site, they can always look at that list to make sure that they're getting the right approved materials. All subcontractors are submitted to ensure appropriate contractors are being utilized on the project. For instance, that they're not debarred, they don't have safety violations, and they've been paying correct prevailing wages, etc. Traffic control plans are reviewed and accepted as well. We also perform materials testing on all the materials on site, and this helps us ensure that the materials used meet specifications and provide us long-lasting infrastructure. We tabulate quantities for contractor payments, daily, weekly, and then the monthly total is used for a monthly pay estimate to the contractor. There's a contract compliance component during construction, and part of what we're looking at there is prevailing wages. There's a minimum prevailing wage that's required for all public works projects that the county does. If it's federally funded or state funded, the higher of the two will be used. There are equal employment opportunity requirements as well as disadvantaged business requirements. These goals are tracked and recorded through completion of the project. We also have the apprenticeship utilization goals that are tracked and reported through completion to ensure compliance with the county ordinance for apprentice goals on public works projects. The next phase, once the work's all complete, is we begin project closeout. What we do here is complete as-builts that basically show any changes that occurred during construction from the initial bid plan set to the final set of plans showing what was built physically in the field. We review and record all final documentation, so all materials, warranties, certified payrolls, affidavits of wages paid, DBE and apprentice goal achievements, etc., all get looked at again to ensure we received all the documents that we needed for the project. At this point, we release the bond and retainage for the project, and then files and documents are archived and retained for the state auditor retention schedule. An operation and maintenance manual is provided to our maintenance staff at this point. And what that does is helps them understand if we built something that has specific maintenance requirements, they're aware of what the frequency of maintenance would be and what equipment and tools they may need to do that maintenance. The last phase of all this is asset management. So with newly constructed infrastructure in place, you need to first track the fact that old assets were removed and remove those from the system. And then the data collected on the new assets gets added into the county's asset management system. These assets include stormwater, traffic components, ADA facilities, roads and pavements, bridges, sewer, and water systems. And with that, I'll give it back to Scott Lindblom for a wrap up.
All right, thanks, Steve. So as I hope you've been able to see today, there is a tremendous amount of work done, again, behind the scenes to really deliver our capital program. We've got the right people in the right positions to make this team highly productive and always improving. Just to put into context as well, when you look at just the road part of our capital program, from 2018 through the end of 2021, Public Works has invested about $50 million into our road system to make them safer, more efficient, and longer lasting for our community. And it's important to do that because as our system ages, these improvements will keep being required on and on and on. But I hope you can be confident that you've got extremely talented people driven to improve public service on perhaps the county's largest asset, which is our county road system. So with that, we will love to entertain some questions for you if you have some. And thus ends the formal part of our presentation.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Raise your hand. Okay, I see both hands. Ladies first.
Usually you
There's a
call
tie.
on Commissioner Mejia, so I accept that. I'm fine. I didn't see that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. I just have a question in regards to project or the phase one in terms of how you identify a need. Is it just by complaint of someone saying there's an issue here, or how does that work? How does we go into that project need? How does it all start?
I'll take that one, Scott. Do you mind? So that's kind of my responsibility, I guess, is, so like I said, the needs brought forth in a number of different ways. A lot of it is from customer service complaints. Obviously we can't be in every part of the county at all times, so a lot of the need or the need is it does come from internet service requests or calls. But then we're also evaluating our transportation system on a yearly basis for capacity management or traffic management to make sure that we're in compliance with the Road Management Act. But we're also making sure that we review all of the state patrol collision reports and the sheriff's reports that are occurring on our traffic transportation system as well, to make sure that there's not reoccurring traffic patterns that are posing a safety issue.
But I think if I could add on to that too, in addition to looking at those, the accidents and the current traffic, we look, 6, 10, 20 years down the road as well to look at what we expect for future traffic issues. We do annual bridge inspections on our bridge program. So with that, we're able to identify those bridges that may not be in bad shape now, but the condition rating is such that it continues to decrease over time. So that's something that the public wouldn't necessarily notice because they continue to drive over the bridge day in and day out. And the condition issues that might be coming up might be under the bottom of the bridge, or might be some upgrades that are needed. A great example of that is the N1 bridge down in the Nisqually River, where there are some cracks in the substructure that were brought up during or identified during some inspections. Driving over it, you would never know that there's any issue, but because we're doing those regular inspections, we're able to find those and look ahead. And then when you look at just the condition of our pavement countywide too, a lot of folks don't necessarily understand that that little bit of cracking they see in the roads, that may not necessarily affect their ride or their drive when they're driving a vehicle. But for us and the pavement management experts we have, they can, when we do the inspections of the pavement, we're being able to project, where the priority system or where the priorities are for upgrading our roads. And we know with our limited funding, we're programming out 4 or 5 years to line up some funding for some of our road upgrades. Great example of that is the 183rd Avenue Southwest that we are planning on rural arterial program money, which is grant money from the County Road Administration Board. But Teresa might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're anticipated for construction on that in about 5 years or so.
Yeah. Yes.
So we're looking, 5 years ahead. And for traffic issues, we're looking, 10, 20 years ahead routinely.
Something I didn't mention is there's also programs that we have here in Public Works, such as our ADA program, where we have an ADA plan where we've reached out to the ADA community to determine what their needs are. And we have a program to prioritize ADA improvements on a yearly basis. We also have another program to address bicyclists and pedestrians. And then, of course, you guys are very familiar, the board is very familiar with our Fish Passage program as well.
Before you move away from the subject, Matt, you touched base on the GMA requirements, and I believe you're talking about the level of service.
That is correct.
Could you elaborate what that really means?
So the county road system, we have the comprehensive plan determines what the acceptable level of congestion we're willing to accept on our county infrastructure system. In the urban areas, it's a level of service D. So if you think of like A being like wide open, you can go as fast as you want, or F being gridlocked. Our acceptable level of service is a D for the urban areas because there's much more traffic. And in the rural areas, it's a level of service C. So we're required, in order to continue development here in Thurston County, we have to meet those levels of service. So a good example of that is the Marvin Road project. And right now we're in the close to the construction phase of a roundabout at Marvin and 19th Avenue. So that, or excuse me, Marvin and Mullen Road. And once that construction has been completed, then we're able to continue to allow development in the Lacey urban growth area.
Okay, Commissioner Edwards, is that you?
Yes. This is maybe minutia, but do you take a look like on your artist's conception there of the roundabout, what it would look like? Do you try to figure out, like, to make sure that there aren't trees in a certain area that might cause frost in the wintertime? And, you know, do you make sure, when you talk about safety, so you don't have a patch of frost there all year and stuff? That's part of your review, I suppose.
I'll take that one, Scott, if you want. Yes, we look at all of the impacts to safety when we do the design and what the clear zone needs to be so that we can build something as safely as possible. Sometimes we can't do everything that would be ideal. And in those cases, if there's something that's special that can't be removed, but we will protect it with a curb or a guardrail or something. But we do take into consideration all that safety.
Okay. I have one other question, and this makes it sound like I'm kind of being picky, but I'm not. I just, because I know the board gets involved at certain points down the road. We had a presentation from Scott and Matt and Teresa and Craig and Teresa and Steve and Scott. And I'm trying to figure out where the county manager comes in and where does the Board of County Commissioners come in. I know that when Craig came up, it was, he did say something about the board was involved at some point. And then Teresa said the board was involved at some point. But it seemed to me the board was involved in several other points in reality, and it just didn't get mentioned. So that's all. I'm just, and then where does the county manager come in? Doesn't he get to, you know, give somebody the dickens about something somewhere along the line here?
He always gets to give everybody the dickens. He's the big boss before, except for the commissioners.
The commissioners gave me the dickens.
No. No.
Yeah, if I may, there are several areas throughout the course of a capital project where the board does get involved. And it really starts with getting a project on the CIP or the TIP for transportation. So that's one of the first opportunities the board has, because the board has the ultimate say on whether projects get added or not. And then it goes in with the budget. The board has an opportunity to approve a budget for a project. Often the board has an opportunity to, or the Commissioner's Office has an opportunity to approve application for grants. Then calls for sealed bids is another opportunity for the board. Call for sealed bids, contract awards, certain consultant contracts. So there's a host of, and actually funding agreements, local agency agreements and such. So there's quite a few opportunities for the board to get involved in the current process.
When you talk about opportunities for funding, Scott, you gave a pretty good layout about, I think on page 2 there, evaluate funding opportunities. Is there a breakdown so we just kind of get, just an idea of, you know, how much the road fund and how about transportation improvement, traffic impact fees, that type of thing? Is that right on the tip of your tongue? I don't want you to have to look it up or anything. I'm just, even rough percentages or something that.
It's not on the tip of his tongue, but it's on the tip.
It is in the tip, and
Wait, you muted up, Scott.
oh, so I said, like a good county engineer, I keep my tip with me at all times.
That will be the transportation improvement program.
Yes, thank you. And in the tip and the revenue sources, it does outline for a capital program where the money comes from. And I'll just at a real high level for you, I'm going to round numbers to the nearest million, but 5 million from state grants, about 2 million from federal grants. Real estate excise tax supporting the fish program is about 3. And then we transfer money from our road fund, so from the county road fund, and one fund to our capital construction fund is just about 1 million. And we have programmed just over 1 million from impact fees as well. So that's, most of our money comes from outside the road fund to support capital projects. And that's typical of counties statewide. Because the cost of projects is typically far outweighing the revenue that really any county has.
Hey, just let me throw you a curveball then right here at the last. We were talking today earlier about tire wear, and when those particles of that tire get in stormwater and eventually get into the creek or whatever, they've now discovered that the coho salmon is adversely affected, for an example, of deteriorating tires. And on a roundabout, undoubtedly, you're going to have more tire wear than you would on a straightaway. So do you have like a settling pond built in at the lower portion of that circle or something, that there is a bit of a curb there and maybe it filters out into a more stringent settling pond than what you'd normally have because of this new science involving tires?
Yeah, we follow the current stormwater standards, and those are fairly strict and govern how we treat all stormwater runoff and how we, I guess, dispose of it, for lack of a better phrase. Out at Yelm Meridian, there is no surface water that we'll be discharging to. I think it's Eaton Creek is about, I don't know, half a mile or so to the east. But where there are no streams or surface water bodies nearby, we are required to, and we always do, provide treatment. And then ultimately the water will soak into the ground and reach the groundwater at some point.
Okay, thanks. Good answers, you guys. Good job.
Scott, I'd like to ask about something I got kind of tangled up in my head. Maybe you can help me straighten it out. When I was trying to work with a citizen on a complaint he had about a road design issue where it related to a new development. So I know that we're out there looking for, safety issues and stuff, but if a new development comes in, maybe that we didn't see coming, and it's gonna impact the traffic and stuff, how does something like that fit into what you presented today? Because what I was told in this instance, and Matt may know what I'm talking about because I think I bugged him about it. Yeah. What I was told was, well, I think it was right on the border of Tumwater in the county, but I can't remember whose staff was involved. But the answer was that the developer couldn't be made to acquire the right-of-ways to do what we could all see was a obviously needed road upgrade for the amount of homes that were going in. So just wondering, like, how does that get managed in terms of a developer comes in, we want the project, but we also want the road upgrade. What can we make the developer do? What does the county step in and able to do, and use of impact fees and all of that?
I'll answer that, Scott. I know exactly the old Highway 99 example you're using.
Yep.
And the city of Tumwater was actually the lead agency on that. But so ideally, we will catch those issues as part of the traffic impact analysis report, which is submitted. And so the development would have to provide those improvements prior to development being finalized. So you wouldn't have to technically react to it. How do I say this? the mitigation requirements would catch it during the development phase of the project rather before it was accepted by the county.
I got the mayor of Tumwater involved in that one, and he said that Tumwater could not require the developer to acquire the right-of-ways needed for the road widening that was going to really be needed to address the problem. And I'm just wondering how that works. Can the government step in and acquire those on behalf, or is it? I mean, why would that be? Who has to take on that responsibility? Was that an accurate answer?
So it's my understanding that the developer, if they need the right of way to complete the project, that they would have to obtain that right of way.
Okay, so we can force them to take those steps that Craig would have taken if it was a county project. We can require a private entity to take those kind of steps to acquire real estate for traffic upgrades.
I don't know what happened to Craig, but one thing is that I think that the developer doesn't have the authority to acquire right of way if the property owner is not willing to give it, sell it.
Right.
And so there are some rights that the county has authority for, but it gets a little bit sticky sometimes. And Craig's really the best one to be able to answer that. And I think he must have had to leave or something.
Okay. Here's a random question I had. When I see the analyses of different intersections and what's going to be best, and it's signal versus roundabout a lot of times, and it seems like roundabout always wins. And I'm just wondering, at least in the ones I've seen superficially, and so I'm wondering, are there situations where a signal is better than a roundabout, and what are the circumstances in which that would come out different?
So where they didn't have in an urban area where you don't have the right of way, or there's close adjacent buildings, then absolutely a traffic signal would probably be the preferred alternative, because even though a roundabout can accommodate more traffic and actually do so more safely than a traffic signal, the right-of-way impacts would be the controlling factor in that case. And so if it means you're going to install a signal to avoid condemning 3 adjacent properties, then the traffic signal would probably be the preferred alternative. But in the rural county areas, you're right. The roundabout usually outweighs the traffic signal. And so it's the long-term maintenance of a traffic signal is 10 times more than what a roundabout is. So selfishly, we do prefer roundabouts.
So I was taking your guys' survey with respect to Mud Bay there, and it was like you could do two choices. And I'm glad you mentioned that last point, because when I took the survey, I could answer as a user, but maybe my county commissioner hat was just creeping on. But it's like the cost mattered to me, and the cost wasn't part of the survey. So it's like if I thought that one was 3 times as expensive, then that might make me choose the other. Whereas you were presenting them as if they were just, what's my preference? And, it's like, okay, well, I guess the roundabout, but I don't know if a roundabout costs, 10 times more to build because of acquiring right-of-way and stuff. And so I don't know what the thought process was behind not letting the public have a clue as to the relative cost. I assume the roundabout was more expensive to build because of the right-of-ways, but now you're throwing in the long-term maintenance and operation. So maybe it kind of washes out. I don't know. That's
correct. Typically, the roundabout's a little bit more expensive to construct, but you have to look at those long-term operational maintenance costs. We in the county, we only have 13 signals in the county. And so only maintaining 13 signals doesn't really justify having a signal maintenance staff. So what we have to do is we have to contract out those maintenance services, so it becomes very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
Okay. I'll just use an example of a location and then see if you can explain a comparison for me. If you go out to Bald Hills Road and Vale Road, there is it's a halfway roundabout. I mean, there's stop signs and yield signs. And it really works well for that particular area. is that because a certain number of people are always turning right? Do you figure that out as part of it? Or does it have to do with those long-range maintenance costs or the original cost of putting in a roundabout versus what you've got out there?
So that intersection you're specifically referencing is Four Corners, I believe.
Yes.
And so Four Corners, that capital project was actually done before we had any roundabouts in the county. And so unfortunately, I don't think that intersection was considered for a roundabout, but that specific intersection would be a good candidate for a roundabout today.
Okay.
But I'm glad you like it.
No, the public likes it. It works. I think it works very well. So just wondering the difference between the cost of something like that versus a roundabout.
You are right. That would be a cheaper alternative than a roundabout.
And I'm always looking for cheap, Matt.
We just told you how good we are at leveraging county money.
I know, and you did good. And I love it. You guys are doing great.
I think Craig came back. Maybe I could ask him my question. So Craig, my question was, while you're unmuting there, my question was, if a big development comes in, it's going to impact the road, and can we require, and in a case we were talking about Old 99, like there really needed to be a road widening so you could put in some left-hand turn lanes or whatever. How do you deal with the developer doesn't have condemnation power or whatever? So, but can the county or the Tumwater in this case step in and do that for the developer? Or because the answer I got on the particular project I was looking at was Tumwater said, well, we knew that was needed, but we couldn't require the developer to acquire the rights of way. So we didn't feel like there was anything we could do, and that seemed like an inadequate answer to me. But I didn't know how this plays out.
So there are ways to do that. You can require developer agreements to fund projects. We're working with the development. What is it? Oak Tree Preserve. They've funded some money that helps for their development to do some roundabout projects, including the acquisition of parcels. So when developments are in the design phase and they meet with the county and trying to get permitting, part of that is in order to allow you to build, we're going to have to increase capacity, and we have the ability to do that through agreements.
Okay.
Could I follow? Oh.
Go ahead.
You mentioned earlier that traffic impact funds are sometimes used on some of these projects, and that I think if I remember right, we're only allowed to keep traffic impact funds in the fund for so long before we start using it and whatnot. So do you use that criteria as how much you take out, and how much do you give credit to, I don't know, home builders or business or whatever that is impacting that? How does that equation fit in?
Who's taking this? I'll take this one. So Commissioner Edwards, I think you're talking to the time frame where we can pay ourselves back to complete a project.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So we have 10 years to repay ourselves back.
Okay.
And there's also 10 years to use the funds once it's in the system. And what the Office of the County Engineer has been doing is taking a comprehensive look at what projects are eligible, because you can only use the traffic impact fees for expansion of the system and not to fix existing problems. And so Matt's taken the lead on the overall look at the county road network and how we collect the fees, at what regions those fees are then allocated to be spent. And then we look at our long range TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan, and balance out how to use those monies and try to leverage, as Matt was talking about, other grant funds or other funding sources. So it's a balancing act with all of the requirements and all of the needs
Are you getting to the point that you're up against it on any particular area where you've collected those and now you're coming up on your 10-year period or something like that? Nothing pushing you, huh?
No, we've been pretty good with
Okay.
programming out the use of those funds. And, you know, we're certainly well aware that the 10-year time frame to use them. So we've got work programmed out, and we're using these traffic impact fee funds, I think, pretty effectively to, you know, prepare to do some preliminary design work for projects that we know are coming up. And so, yeah, I don't think we've run into the, you know, the 10-year window on, I don't think on any of the funding yet. So, and our goal is to not. Certainly, we want to use that money because it was invested with the county for a purpose to address future capacity issues. So, I think we've been pretty effective at using it thus far.
5 minutes left, so a final question, County Manager, Commissioner Mejia,
Nope,
Goblin. Nope,
no from my end. Thank you.
okay.
Good job, everyone. Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good job. Good to see you all.
Thank you.